been a while since I've recorded, but each day that's passed that I haven't recorded, I've been aware of that, and I think I've been aware that I've not tried to force anything to, as much as this is a tool to help myself in different ways to record and upload. It was perhaps a state of mind where I was feeling perhaps too drained or exhausted to talk. As useful as it may have been, it was sometimes you almost feel too unwell to use certain tools in life and things that usually help. Strangely enough, I woke up this morning feeling extremely low, and got an itch on my foot, and there was immediately the thought that it would be perhaps a good day to do a bit of recording. So I went to bed last night a little bit late. Feels like missing the mark. It can be quite a narrow can't think of the word, narrow. Perhaps I can say it differently. It doesn't take much to hit the mark and go into bed on time, and then suddenly being a bit late. It feels like it can happen a blink of an eye. And it wasn't, I guess it was was fairly late, but it wasn't wasn't too much in the early hours. But I think overnight I didn't get a great sleep. Maybe the last couple of nights I haven't. I've been experiencing some chest pain the last few days, so trying to get to the bottom of that. It doesn't feel like it's anything urgent, or at least on the surface it's not anxiety related. Like I'm not there's kind of the usual amount of anxiousness that's always there, but yeah. And this morning it was just lots of thoughts of perhaps a culmination of certain things withdrawing in my life, receding. It's been a common theme, and it was just kind of seeing some of the bleakness of that, of kind of finding a reason to sort of get out of bed a little bit, or just feeling a bit fed up and drained of everything. Some of this, it could have just been like a low level of maybe I'll talk about this in the podcast. It's more related to sort of trapped energies or things like that, but maybe it's a sort of a low wave of energy appearing on me, and of course the mind tries to grab it and interpret it, but on a sort of mind level, I guess it's just maybe my mood feeling quite low. That's fair to say. Maybe it was the acknowledgement that things are continuing to get more difficult. There isn't really there may be some sort of moments of a bit of energy, but it's still in that sort of bracket of feeling low. It's not like I suddenly jump out of it and go back to a state of mind or a wellness I remember 6 months ago or more, whether things were different than they are now. So maybe that the consistency of how my health's been, especially in the last several months, it's just maybe the culmination of that. I kind of woke up this morning just, part of it I was probably a bit lacking in sleep and tired, so that probably immediately drained my energy and mood, and probably really coloured my energy. And then you had a sprinkling of a thought of what's the point, or the acknowledgement of things receding and feeling the pain of that. Sometimes it can quickly manifest into something much bigger. So I found myself just lying in bed, in between figuring out trying to go to sleep and just a sort of place of inertia, I guess, not really able to move. I think eventually there was enough energy and motivation to the thought of I didn't want to just lay here too long in the morning, more afraid of that it will disrupt my sleep tonight. So that was my main, that kind of kicked in, and I was able to get up, and there was an encouraging thought of, okay, what about if you just hit the ground running, even though you've gotten up late? You know, I had to kind of trim my hair, which feels like a task in itself to do, and then showering, which felt like a task as well, and then doing my foot exercises. And I thought, okay, let's just hit the ground running. So I managed to, I think perhaps in spite of the energy, it allowed me to kind of work with that. I thought, okay, even though I'm feeling like this, let's see if I can. Yeah, there was some spark in me that I was able to still propel myself into those tasks, because they all felt quite difficult to do. The showering always feels like a bit of a mountain to climb, and then adding on to that the task of trimming my hair. And so I thought, before I get too down or think feel the weight of those tasks ahead of me, I thought, let's just dive into it. I was able to sort of do that today. And it was really difficult. Even with my hair, I've noticed I missed 2 blotches on the back of my head that weren't, the trimmer didn't get. And I was, so for me, a sign of not being hard on myself, that it was a real struggle to do. So I managed to do that, and then shower with the sort of medicated cream, and then put on some more medicated cream post shower, it all feels like quite a big task, quite a big energy to do. And then the morning was getting late, so I was feeling kind of hungry as well as I was kind of doing these tasks, and realizing, okay, after this I've got to do my foot exercises, because if I don't do them sort of straight after coming out of a shower, then it's less likely, or even the chances get less for me to do them later. So I kind of, once I changed to come outside, I did my full exercises, and then I kind of used that propelling sort of energy to, it felt like I had that spark today, where a lot of days I don't have that spark of energy to push through despite feeling where I'm feeling. But something different today, where maybe perhaps on other days I'd feel, okay, now I've got to make breakfast, I don't know if I can do that, and I'd probably sit down, but I managed to kind of just move on to that task of making breakfast and making coffee, and managed to sit down and eat that, and then I rested a little bit, but then that kind of spark continued as well, as after a bit of rest, I was watching this chess podcast, and I found myself washing some of the dishes left in the sink, and I've sort of rested a bit after that, and now it's kind of mid-afternoon now, where it should, be good for me to have some lunch, and I thought it was just about recording. So that's where I'm at for today, but it already feels like I've done a lot. It feels like the tasks of showering and sort of making breakfast, it feels like it's almost like that's the maximum I can manage at the moment. I'm putting all my energy into doing those tasks it took to make breakfast. It's almost like my sort of job to take care of myself in that way, where sort of a well person would have taken care of themselves and working as well. But for me right now, this is perhaps in some ways it's a good day in that I was able to do this. Like usually I'd probably not be able to take care of myself in this way, I guess. So it feels like even these are basic things I'm doing, it feels like an accomplishment. And now I'm going to try and propel myself again and making lunch, and just sort of in some ways try not to think about it too much, but just sort of I've got that bit of energy in me today, and there's an awareness in me that it's not like, okay, I can use this every day, because sometimes this spark is not there, this sort of bit of energy I have, because I find sometimes if I was to kind of share this day with somebody, they'd go, great, yeah, you're getting better, or sometimes they'll perceive it differently, not realizing that most days this probably sounds too harsh, but I'm sort of dead in the water, and I'm just struggling to move this way a little bit, move that way a little bit, but it's not necessarily a linear thing where, okay, I've had a day where I was able to push myself through stuff, and okay, next day you can do even more and more, and it's like, no, next day I may not be able to get up out of bed. It feels like it's an infinite argument of stuff there, where infinite perspectives of stuff. So I find myself trying to be on the defensive for those views, and can't really afford to disperse my energy in that way. I just have to almost, this is linked to self-compassion and I guess seeing the truth in things and how my health is, and not getting external things to make myself feel that I'm not just being lazy, or I'm not pushing myself enough. Sometimes it's quite dangerous to be disconnected to how you're feeling and going off of that. And the tricky thing for me is, I guess, is that trust in how I'm feeling, because it feels like I'm part of my feeling unwell is a lot of things are distorted, so it's that challenge as well sometimes. So when someone does mention, perhaps this is something you can do, it's almost a corrosive effect on me. It's not something I can cleanly process and sort of filter my way through it with the mind and think, okay, yeah, but it's almost like a corrosive effect, like pouring a chemical into another chemical that has that reaction, that corrosive reaction. I know a past theme was simplicity as well, so it feels like I've been trying to use that more nowadays. Like for example, one sort of, it's not a new symptom, but perhaps a new awareness of my struggles is with simple tasks of how to order things. Say if I was I'm making some kind of simple meal like toast or beans on toast or something like that, with making a cup of coffee. Sometimes I think, okay, what do I do first? Should I put the bread in the toaster first? Should I boil the kettle and get the coffee brewing first? And it takes longer to kind of sift through that thought process to think, okay, well, the coffee's got to brew for about 5 minutes, so in that time I can kind of put the toast in and warm up whatever I need to warm up during that time. But where before that would click in quite quickly to think, yeah, let's do that. While that's happening, I can do this. But now it's almost like nothing's clear. It's like, okay, there's no sort of clear, familiar path to take. It's almost like I'm in a brand new city again. Instead of walking a familiar path outside, maybe this is a useful analogy. I'm in a brand new city and I've got to think, okay, right, should I go this way and this way? It's just working out these basic things, and I'm not sure if there's labels for that, but that's a useful symptom. I'm glad I can kind of remember to share it on here, because part of this feels like a bit of a documentation on my health, because it feels like this serves many purposes, but one of the purposes it serves is, it's a fear and almost a reality of me getting worse and losing my sense of self, my consciousness, and how my health is. That this is almost a document of it sounds dark, but of me unraveling in some ways. And so if it gets to a point where I'm too unwell to talk about myself, then there's almost a trail of how my health has been. I can perhaps explain, and maybe it's like a 45-hour trail, 100-hour trail of some of these vlogs that end up being 45 minutes of oversharing, maybe. but yeah, it's some way of trying to keep my sanity, to kind of share about my mind, I guess. And it's nice where I can be relaxed enough to be, where space to not have to put on a face of, I'm okay, because I feel like the more my health's been affected, the more my face has changed and my expressions, where that filter is disintegrating a bit more. That's another thing I found. Like, I'd go to the park and I'll be looking at the trees, and I won't be looking in like a sort of normal way, in some sense of where, I'm just observing my face is kind of minimal movements. My face would just be a bit scrunched up, or I kind of look like that, and I'm sure I look very strange, but it's almost an unfiltered, it's almost the unwellness sort of coming through, and I'm not filtering it as much. I don't have the energy, which is part of the health. There's less of a filter to kind of put on a brave face and look like you're well, or look like normal facial expressions. And I find in this vlog it's too exhausting to try and, there isn't any thoughts of trying to mask anything, which I'm grateful for as well. It's almost like a safe space to allow the face to be as it is, where there's no effort to kind of try and mask or present myself in a certain way. So I'm kind of glad for that, really, because that takes a lot of energy, mental energy, and to kind of keep up and do. If I was to see a family member, naturally that kicks in, because I don't want them to worry about me or see me, because some of the facial expressions can, from that you could probably think, this guy, is going through something, or the health or the wellness of that person shows sometimes with their I don't know if atypical is the right word, but yeah, so my mind's gone a bit blank. Just kind of rattled off a few things that I've noticed this past week, I guess. But I think one of the other things I find is that feels like I'm getting worse, but it's not as distinct as before. For example, if there was a color red and it was changing to orange, it could be, or red changing to blue. It's quite clear when that transition happens. But now, the changes are more subtle, and it's hard to keep track of them as well. So I'm finding that a little bit where it's a little bit scary in that sense, where I'm kind of, for example, dissociation. It's now it's happening more and more. I can feel it now in some sense. I pushed myself to visit a friend yesterday, and we played some chess, and it was really nice to spend time with a friend. It's something I've been really struggling with, and even then I felt sort of dissociation happening in and out of being disconnected in myself, and it was not a nice feeling to have. And I was just acknowledging that as time goes on, maybe things like that will be more spaced out, to talk about feeling isolated or not being able to spend time with people. And it's one of those sort of things, challenges with either feeling mentally drained with social interaction, or now feelings of dissociation as well. And it does make it challenging. For example, right now there's no sort of feeling, or I've no idea when it'll be the next time I'll be able to social interact in that way. It's at the same time, it feels like it may be a long way away. Like, whether I need, in terms of my health, I could only sort of gather myself to do that. I think of the word periodically, I think is the word. So gaps, long gaps, and then, but also there's an unpredictability where suddenly I may have a day of better energy. I may have like a really good sleep, and maybe on that day I think, oh yeah, do you know what, I can see somebody. But it's kind of those two things. I'm feeling, I think one of you noticed recording the vlogs, I feel a bit more drained as well. I guess it makes sense, because I'm using my mind in some ways. I'm accessing my mind and trying to evaluate how I'm feeling, and that can take a lot of energy as well. Maybe that shows how limited my mental energy is, my stamina, where very quickly, I guess I'm on 23 minutes. I can feel my mind already feeling quite drained. So perhaps I should wrap up this video. So I guess the main thing I wanted to share is just the ways of how things are getting more challenging for me. Maybe the positive thing is, it doesn't feel like it's tragic or sad, because it's been there for a while now. So it's almost like I've kind of gotten over that, or I've let go of that, because it feels like it's right now. It's not going anywhere. It's kind of my reality. So I've kind of almost had to accept it in some ways. One quick thing I'll say about writing is that I have been mentioned before. I've been toying with the idea of trying to experiment or see how it is if I try and write for 10 minutes somewhere, and see if, like, say, as an experiment, to see first of all if it brings any sort of enjoyment and productivity, whether it helps with my mental health in any ways. And I have a feeling it won't, though. because I've just shut that down, but I will try. But just from past experiences for the last 3 or 4 years, where the writing's been significantly changed, my patterns and what I'm able to do. And I don't feel like, even though I'm going to try this just because maybe out of desperation, because I feel like at the moment there's not a huge amount in my life that I'm enjoying or able to do really, and I just don't want to kind of sit and suffer, which is a large part of the reality or the challenge of dealing with my health. It's and maybe it's something that can give me a brief respite. That used to bring a lot of joy, and I feel it still feels there's a lot of stuff inside me about writing, but the cognitive energy and functionality required to do it is where I struggle. But there's still, prior to that cognitive, there's still a creative energy in me, but it doesn't feel like there's a way to express it anymore. So that's just sort of painful as well. So I'm going to try maybe tomorrow, at the start of the week, I've got to return a library book that I've had for months. I've just not been able to return. I'm not going to read it because I'm just struggling to read a lot of. So perhaps that's something I can try and do tomorrow as a focus for the day. Perhaps for the rest of this afternoon, I'm going to do my best to at least get outside today and a bit of exercise. I may try and do a few laps around the park and potentially upload this if I'm able to. I have dinner sorted for tonight. I was able to cook something last night, and I had a moment last night. I'll share it here. So I kind of made this, I made the meal, and it took a while to make, and then I put the plate on my lap tray that's balanced on my footstool, and the lap tray was slanted, so when I put it down and turned around to put a YouTube video on a laptop, I heard this crash and my plate of food and everything fell on the floor. So kind of 2/3 of it was not recoverable, and I almost stood there, saw all the food on the floor, and this left a huge stain on this rug, so I don't think I'll be able to get out. But I just stared at it, thinking I just don't have the energy to pick it up, and I just didn't know what to do really. I just stood there, kind of just thought, obviously I felt a bit of annoyance and pain, but I tried not to complain about it. Maybe I'll talk about this more on my podcast whenever I record a podcast episode, but that was last night. This happened, and I was just I tried to refrain from and this has happened also. I'm dealing with it, it feels like I'm dealing with a lot, and now I can't even. And I kind of understood it's just part of my lack of energy to concentrate and to be careful with things. Sometimes it feels like with my health I'm becoming more clumsy with things. So now I've got to be a bit more careful with that. So I'm gonna decide to leave my plate on the counter, but only take it off there when I'm ready to sit down. I can grab the lap tray and not sort of half balance it on other things. I've got to just be a bit more careful. But I thought it would be funny to share, but it doesn't. I don't think it is that funny, to be honest. But maybe it's just another thing to note as well, of certain things that I've just got to be aware of in terms of the unsteadiness in my hands and that kind of stuff. But yeah. So I'm going to just make some lunch and hopefully get outside to get some fresh air. That will be good for me, I think, for today.